Cents Per Mile, featuring Charles Gracie, Paul Gibson, and Josh Haynes. Everyone knows the trucking industry has issues, but most people are afraid to talk about it.
Someone's got to do it.
With loads of recruiting and marketing experience and backed by the largest driver audience in the world, we deliver carriers the driver perspective, find solutions, and help make sense make sense.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes. What's going on, guys? What are we talking about today?
We're talking about driver physical and mental health.
Yep. I mean, that's a huge thing. I mean, it's hard to stay healthy when most of your food choices are roller grill items. And it's hard to also stay healthy when, you're isolated and you're tired, and then that can get to you too. But yeah, we'll definitely dive into that. Before we get to all of that, the usual, we are on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on iHeartRadio, we're on YouTube. So if you could go like, subscribe, rate, rinse, repeat, all of those things, it helps us get further out there and gets us more exposure so we can do some cooler stuff.
And you can also visit centspermilepodcast.com to suggest a topic, submit yourself to be a guest, or even request to be a sponsor.
Speaking of sponsors, who's our sponsor today, Charles?
We have Drivers Legal Plan. Drivers Legal Plan is the national law firm dedicated to protecting the rights of drivers and their ability to drive, therefore protecting the interests of the trucking company. Check them out at driverslegalplan.com.
All right, well, I think it's time for the news. All right, so it's time for 10-2 news. And normally we would go through and we would find, like trucking related stories. But one big thing with mental health is sometimes it's good to walk away from work and do something else. So we decided to just cover stories that we wanted to cover.
Is this your way of like forcing me not to do work since I failed to do that on my own?
I mean, you do a pretty terrible job of not working. I'm pretty sure, you're Mr. 24/7. But anyway, so I mean, one of the first things is, I don't know, I'm super nerdy. I got Star Wars tattoos. That new Star Wars Acolyte show came out, and a lot of people seem to have a lot of beef with it. What do you think about that, Charles? Have you watched it?
I watched it. I actually binge watched it the other night when I found time, and I'm kind of digging it. But I'm a Star Wars nerd. If I'm going to nerd out on something, it's going to be Star Wars. I'm enjoying it. I don't like how everyone has to politically charge everything. Like it's a show. Enjoy the show. Watch the show. Either you like it or you don't. Cool thing is you can watch other things.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. There's a lot of people saying, oh, it's going woke. And it's like, I don't know, man. It's kind of nice to see some representation. There's a lot of people that, like 20 years ago had never seen themselves on screen. And that's happening more and more often. Sure, maybe they didn't ease into it, but I don't think that's necessary. I'm actually enjoying the show quite a bit. And I think the only other thing that's not related to that people have a gripe about is they're making the Jedis out to be the bad guys. But realistically, they go around and they snatch up kids and train them and take away them from their families, which eventually the Republic turns into this giant, essentially dictatorship under the guise of a republic. And then, that gets taken over by some people. A couple people flip it over, but then they stick around long enough to see themselves become the villain. And then the rebellion comes out and, everybody's like, oh, maybe, the Force shouldn't be a political movement.
Paul, you just spoiled the first 3 episodes for anyone that hasn't watched it.
Well, I mean, that's Star Wars in general. That's the whole plot line. But that being said, speaking of politics, it's an election year. And, regardless of how you feel about things, typically placing job ads gets more expensive because job ads and political ads run in the same category. But I'd be pretty curious to find out whether or not job ads are more expensive since the primary essentially ended in February. So I didn't find the numbers in time, but I do actually have some people at CDLLife who do have that kind of data looking into it. And I think here in a week or so, we might have an answer.
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of people that didn't know that job ads, when it comes to social media, and political ads are put in the same special ad category. So naturally, because they're in that same category, and guess who has more money to take over that category during an election season? It's not you, carriers, by the way. But yes, their ads are less efficient, less productive because they're getting drowned out with the political ads. You even see a period of time right before the election, and they should probably do it again this year. They did it the last two. Right before the election, it's usually the week before, they shut off that category altogether. They shut that category down. So those people that are leveraging social media only rather than some job boards, leveraging their audiences, those people find it difficult during those times. But it's interesting to see what those numbers are leading up to that time.
Speaking of getting shut off, though, it might be the last year you can put ads on TikTok, just like between TikTok and then DJI, which I'm close to. That's, there's 70% of, the U.S. drone market, even the global market. That's like what I use, whenever I've filmed stuff with drones. Anyone I've ever worked with is using DJI. And now, like, because, they're afraid that China is getting, some sort of user information, being in touch with the DoD, and then TikTok, spewing out, they think that it's a use for, outside interference and propaganda, even though the past two elections, American sources and social media have been blamed for that. I think that's kind of interesting that we're trying to ban that.
Well, it kind of goes to the conversations we've had about that. Is it's okay for, us to do it internally as a nation, but for another nation to get in there and control that propaganda, that's a big no-no. So,
Well, but I mean, that we're banning everything. Like we're banning Zen. That's recently kind of under attack right now.
But there's alternatives. See, you got your Zen, and now you have Lucy. So, I mean, until they ban that, I can still order it to my house.
But that's what I mean. We're just like banning things, and most of it's for political points and that kind of thing. It seems like we're taking more away people's rights. But I guess that's why we stick to trucking, and we don't really have a political show, unless. Actually, does anybody out there, you can feel free to put in the comments. Maybe we'll put out another poll. Do you think that we need a political show that's actually based from the trucking industry perspective? Like a political show that could get a little bit more heated. Do you think that's a thing? I don't know.
I'm sure hoping everyone says no. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's politics. It's kind of nice to have something without it.
That is true. But that being said, speaking of sponsors and that kind of thing, who hopefully don't hate us now, it's time for Behind the Desk with Tenstreet.
All right, so for Behind the Desk, we got Ed Johannes from Tenstreet. He's the director of sales. How we doing, Ed?
Obviously, we're talking about this whole driver wellness thing, and I'd just like to throw a couple points out there, right? So you guys all know that overall driver health is a very extremely important topic, not only for the drivers, but for the carriers also, right? By the nature of the position itself, right, drivers sometimes find themselves, lacking that physical activity, being faced with situations due to things like, deadlines, it's making it more stressful, things like that. And of course, the obvious one is, the lack of healthy food options that are available on the road, right? All those things contribute to a driver's physical health and mental health, right? And sometimes lead to a driver's ability to even maintain a valid or current medical card, right? Carriers continue to find themselves losing drivers because the driver can't maintain a long-term medical certificate. And typically this is, due to things like diabetes or blood sugar numbers, not being in control. Obviously, obesity, health disease, high blood pressure also have a large impact, right? So drivers obviously need more support than ever, right? Drivers need to know that carriers are here to help and support their health. And we need, and we can create the accountability to do that in a fun way, right? And that's kind of where Tenstreet comes in. Tenstreet has taken steps to help provide drivers and carriers achieve this through our Pulse Wellness, right? And if you guys aren't familiar, the Pulse Wellness is a feature that's driven through our Driver Pulse app. And allows drivers to kind of track wellness challenges that get created by their employers, right? So it keeps it light, it keeps it fun. They can complete these goals and tasks that are related to rewards and incentives, right? So again, there are things like challenges for step goals and water intake and stuff like that, right? Like, so it's not super taxing, but it has a large impact on their overall health in general, right? And obviously, when drivers become more engaged, it's a healthy win for everybody.
Attention truckers, it only takes one ticket to lose your job because of unnecessary traffic convictions. But you can protect your career with Driver's Legal Plan, an actual national law firm dedicated to protecting the rights of truck drivers. We make the highest quality legal representation available to truck drivers, and we make it affordable. You can rest easy knowing you have a trucker's attorney always on your side. Call Driver's Legal Plan today to start protecting your driving record and your career.
All right, so it's time to make sense and talk about our main topic, which is driver mental and physical health. Maybe what that looks like from the carrier perspective, what that looks like from the driver's perspective, and what carriers can actually do to help with that situation. I mean, Charles, I go to you a lot because, you did it. So first, I guess let's start physically. Like, what are the biggest barriers to entry besides the obvious, like the lack of food options?
Food options is one of them, but it's a lack of free time. I mean, these drivers do not get to decide their time off. The hours of service does, and the needs of those trucks being in specific spots. So for a driver to necessarily plan ahead to where they're going to stop, it's not exactly easy. There's a lot of work just on that part and that component to make that happen. And then it's where they're going and where they have accessibility with a truck. Now I know some people that are like, oh, you can get an Uber. Yeah, that costs money in a market where drivers don't necessarily make a lot of money. Then there's, the time. All day long, you're listening to someone in this ear tell you where to go, when to stop, where to get fuel. And then in this ear, you got someone telling you, well, you need to do it this way and that way. They're physically exhausted by the end of the day with all the nonsense they got to deal with. And then they have to muster enough to invest into themselves. So that's one of the challenges with being a truck driver in today's world is physically you have that. But then before you even get to that, mentally, you're exhausted. You're hearing people tell you how to do the job, when to do the job, how you should feel while doing the job, but they're not physically doing the job. And they're definitely not having all these people chirping in their ear along the way. And then there's the personal aspect of it. So, I mean, these drivers have a whole bunch of things against them that make it easier not to do this, but they should definitely be doing this because it provides a comfort of knowing you're going to have longevity in the job.
For sure. And I mean, it's even like whenever I locked myself in the closet and followed hours of service, even though I wasn't driving, sure, like I wasn't doing the work of having to pay attention to the road and that kind of stuff, but I was so mentally drained from that and that isolationism that I literally became physically exhausted. So yeah, those are huge barriers. But I think we have a guest. Our first guest is going to tell us some pretty cool ways to possibly work with or get around those things. Who we got, Charles?
We got Dr. Mark from Offshift. How we doing, Mark?
I'm doing good. Paul, Charles, thank you so much for having me.
So we're talking about driver physical and mental health, and that's one of the things that you've been advocating for a long time. So tell us a little bit about your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, you brought up your isolation challenge, and it is something that I think about so often because when we are working with drivers and trucking companies and just employees within the supply chain, one of the biggest barriers that I see is that just mentally drained after a long shift. And, when you don't have the bandwidth to think about, okay, I get done with my driving and all I want to do is, eat a roller dog and veg out and watch Netflix. It's really difficult to, find the healthiest option and go for a walk or run, right? And what I've recognized, and I think it's a big thing within the industry and just because of the unique lifestyle that drivers live, is that a lot of these companies, the health benefits that they're offering are all industry agnostic, which, means that they're handing these like wellness programs to a driver who, the same thing that they're handing to a software engineer down the street. And when you look at the lifestyle and also the culture and also just language drivers, the drivers speak, if you want them to actually engage, you have to, what we always say, smack them in the face that it was built for them. And you have to build something that fits into their lifestyle anywhere they drive, at any time. And that's really what we're focused on at Offshift. And that's what we've seen to actually be successful to get them engaged and keep them engaged into some of these health benefits.
So that's an interesting take on it, because we've seen the articles, and heck, we've even covered some on cents per mile where these programs were built, like you said, for, people that aren't doing the driver's job. There was one carrier that, best of intentions, put together a whole program with a private trainer at the terminal for the drivers. Guess who's not making money if they're hanging out at the terminal? So you've kind of put something together where it's accessible to the drivers. And I've even, we've been friends for some time now. You find ways to make it fun, which, lo and behold, if you make it fun, people will participate and hop in on it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And you mentioned something about like earlier saying, hey, you got to get an Uber, you got to find a gym that you can go park your truck at. And then after that, you got to figure out, is there even truck parking available for me to sleep tonight? And all of these things are just barriers that stack up to make it even harder and harder for drivers. And so for us, it's, we do things that they can do in the back of their truck. We help them eat healthier at the Love's truck stop or the McDonald's attached to it. And it's really every single turn of a driver's life cycle within the industry and at their company, we try to find a way to fit healthier activities and behaviors into their day-to-day life.
Well, I think that's key to the successful program for the drivers and for the carriers trying to invest in their drivers being healthier so they can have longevity in the company. I mean, how many times have we talked to drivers? I see it all the time on the recruiting side. They're getting knocked out for all various reasons, but the one they can control is that medical card. Like, it's not like they got to go in there and run a triathlon to get their medical card. They just got to be within healthy parameters to do the job safely for everyone around them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, as the average age of a driver is getting older and older, it's getting even more difficult for them sometimes to pass that medical card. And so trying to find a way to make your health a priority and make it, a part of your day-to-day life, like you said, it doesn't take a ton. A lot of the times it's taking your medication that your doctor gave you on a consistent basis. So your, insulin levels are controlled, and also your blood sugar and blood pressure is controlled. And then it's going for a walk or, eating more protein or drinking less sugar. It's like these small behaviors that don't really change your day-to-day life a ton, but done consistently for a long period of time can be life-changing. And it can be life-changing during your career, but also after your career when you're thinking about your family and enjoying life after trucking as well.
So that's some good stuff. If someone wanted to get involved or a driver wanted to participate on your platform, how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, offshift.ai is our website, or Offshift across all social medias, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Dr. Mark Manera.
Awesome stuff. Thanks for coming on Cents Per Mile.
Thanks for having me.
Reputation is everything when it comes to your brand, but it can be hard to maintain and even harder to quantify. With CDLLife's Reputation Watch tool, you can get access to insights from the largest driver audience in the world. Drivers will be anonymously presented a short survey about your company. Then we'll deliver you the data showing how you're perceived by drivers and the level of awareness you have within the market, better enabling you to leverage other awareness tools effectively and efficiently to improve and grow your brand. This tool could change everything.
All right, so our next guest is a friend of mine, someone that's been in transportation. We got Holly Wysong with us. She's the regional sales manager of Unipipe. How we doing, Holly?
I'm good, Charles. Thanks so much for having me, you guys.
I couldn't think of someone else that could bring an outside perspective better than yourself, because you've been in trucking, but outside of that, you kind of have a hobby of your own that fits into the whole topic of physical health.
Yeah. And one thing that I'd like to talk about to share for all the drivers, I myself now, since being in sales, am on the road a lot, on the plane, in my car. So there's many ways that you can coach your drivers to make their health convenient. So one thing that I do to prepare myself is I prep all of my meals on my off day. I have a very large lunchbox bag that creates all my meals. Now, obviously, like you said, they don't always have time to stop, pull over, whatever. I eat my meals cold since they're pre-cooked. That's one way to stay on top of your nutrition to avoid, that fast food hot dog. that I found works great. Just having your meals in place. And if you don't have time to cook before you get on the road, stop at a Mariano's. They'll cook for you. And all you got to do is measure it out into a separate container and eat it as you go throughout the day. And like you said, again, with the gyms, trying to find a fitness center or a gym wherever they have to stop because, the clock dictates their travel, right? I suggest just maybe supplying them from, work, some lightweight bands. You don't need weights. You could do body weight or bands and have that be part of their challenge. Do 10 minutes of band bicep curls, do 10 minutes of band sidewalks, and then have them track that to continue their challenge. Obviously, the biggest excuse for most Americans, not just drivers, is convenience and time when it comes to their health. But it only takes a couple hours to be able to make that time throughout your week.
So that's some great advice. And, one of the reasons I want to bring you on is you've been in transportation on a couple different angles. And then I want to discuss this new exciting position you're in. So first off, you used to work at one of the sleep apnea clinics. So you got to see all the drivers that had struggles getting through that process. And then you worked at a trucking company in the dispatch office. And now you're on this new exciting endeavor. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this job was kind of sent over to me by one of my best friends. She is actually in transportation and she ships for this company. Suggested that I get in sales for the last 2 years. I know you've suggested it at a time as well. So I decided to interview with the owner of Unipipe Solutions, and he liked me so much he thought he'd give me a chance. It's a whole new animal for me. I am still learning every day. This is going into my 7th week in the piping industry, but we service so many different outlets. So our piping is for compressed air, which, as you know, a lot of repair shops need the lifts, the air for the tires, oil, multi-fluid systems. Our piping handles all that, HVAC. It's insane what I'm learning. And I also found out compressed air is one of the most expensive utilities in the world. So I'm learning every day, and it's a new challenge. And if you know me, I kind of like to be a little headstrong and jump into a lot of male-dominated industries to show them what's up.
No, it's cool stuff that you bring these different perspectives, especially in your new role. I'm sure that's going to be an asset to the company. If someone wanted to reach out to you guys because they were interested in learning more about Unipipe, how would they do so?
They can find me on LinkedIn at Holly Wysong, or they can email me at holly.wysong@unipipesolutions.com, and I'd be happy to teach them a little bit more.
Awesome. And if someone had to pick, one phrase that could benefit the drivers and their physical and mental health, what would it come to mind, or what would come to mind for you?
Convenience makes it easier.
There you go. Thanks for coming on Cents Per Mile, Holly.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, well, so that was some pretty interesting stuff. That was definitely an interesting take from someone who's been in the industry, then got into that, and looking back at the industry, how that works. And Mark had some great stuff to say, and I think one of the things that he said that really when he was talking, was he said that you almost have to slap them in the face that it's for them. I think that's huge because they do get handed so much stuff, like he was saying, that's meant for other people or that's like super agnostic to everything. It does make sense that the drivers would be more receptive when it's like clearly this is for you, not just another blanket solution.
Well, look at how it's designed. How many things have been designed for the drivers, but they're not truly for the drivers. They're for somebody else's purposes. So when you're trying to give them something that's truly going to benefit them, like health and mental health, support, you almost have to make it so easy for them to understand it's for them and that there's not ulterior motives behind it, because so many things do have ulterior motives behind it.
Well, then there's so many people that just have a brilliant idea, not to discredit that idea, but aren't necessarily familiar with the industry, and then just take that idea and try to essentially put it on the industry, even though it doesn't actually fit. But people don't really think it through, and they're just like, oh yeah, well, cool, you relabeled it, we're good.
And when you're looking at what these drivers are up against, as someone that's done the job, I could tell you they have so many obstacles in their way to actually make this accessible, that the things that are accessible get drowned out by all the other noise. Like the gyms and stuff that carriers put in there for when drivers are at the terminals. Those are a great step in the right direction, but that's a step and a very small one because the drivers aren't at the terminals much. And if they are, they're not making money for you or themselves. But, gym memberships while they're on the road, mental health support for those bad days, or maybe they have they need support ongoing. Not every driver is coming home to a family. Some drivers, it's just them. They come home to just them. That makes it a very lonely life. And then you compound all the issues that come into trucking. We need to give them both the physical and mental health support in order to protect our investment into them being within the companies, but also to help them protect their investment to stay within that company.
Yeah, and I think the other huge thing is to actually give them guidance on how to use the things, because you could take things like you could give them equipment, access to equipment, but how do they use it? Like, I mean, most people struggle with that. That's why so many people buy gym memberships on January 1st to get thin, but then they get to the gym and they're like, what is this? How does this work? But they don't want to pay the extra money for the personal trainer, or no one's there to help them through it. But
gym videos of mishaps on equipment, that's for sure.
Oh no, it's totally true. And I think it's one of those things, like you could give the driver, a set of, exercise equipment or like things that they can use inside the truck. But if you don't give them any guide on how to use it, it's not going to be that great. I think actually maybe that's the next like Pisper video or something. We have a company just like give all the drivers like shake weights for their trucks.
Yeah, I still can't believe someone actually put that out there and people bought it. But hey, whatever works.
It's a thing. Well, what does work is this show. It's crazy how much it's grown. It's crazy where it's been and where it's going. That being said, we do have some cool news in the pipeline, but until then, I think it is time to go.
As all things come to an end, especially the good ones, I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.